David Groves, and I'm going to be talking to you today about wildfires in the state of Colorado. The scene was apocalyptic. The sky was red and the sun barely visible behind a thick haze of smoke. People gathered all of their valuables from their homes and packed them into their cars. These were just a few of the descriptions of the Waldo Canyon fire that burned 347 homes and claimed the lives of 2 people at the western edge of Colorado Springs. Every summer, wildfires affect the state of Colorado by burning thousands of acres. Today, I want to talk to you about what the basics of a wildfire are, how they start, the history of wildfires in Colorado, and finally, the devastation of the Waldo Canyon fire. First, let's take a look at the basics of what a wildfire is. Kevin Bostner, writing for HowStuffWorks.com, gives a good review of wildfires and what causes them. In the right conditions, a wildfire can start with even something as small as a spark, and sometimes not even a spark is required when the sun is hot enough to actually cause the fuel to reach its flash point and start a fire out of nothing. A lot of people believe that wildfires are mostly started by natural causes of things like the sun or lightning, but that's actually not true. Most of the time, a wildfire is caused by human carelessness, and some of the things that humans do to cause wildfires are arson, campfires, lit cigarettes, improperly burning debris, playing with matches or fireworks, and prescribed fires. There are 3 components that are needed for ignition and combustion of a fire. Those are fuel, oxygen, and the heat source, and these 3 together are known as the fire triangle. There's 3 factors that determine how a wildfire will spread, and those are fuel, weather, and topography. With the fuel, it's all about the type and the quantity that is available. Sometimes there's smaller, more spread out fuel, and in that case it'll burn very quickly across an area of land, but actually won't stay lit for very long. So it's kind of like when you have kindling in a campfire, it will just burn up really fast. It also depends on the moisture content of the fuel. If it has a low moisture content, it's more likely to catch fire right away. Also, the weather will affect how the fire will spread. The temperature, if the heat is very high, then it's very likely to spread because the fuel it takes a lot of the moisture out of the fuel and also brings it closer to its incineration point. And also the wind is very unpredictable, and the wind does 2 things. First of all, it supplies the fire with oxygen, which kind of fuels the fire more, and it can also push the fire across land at a really high rate, and it can even cause fire to jump. So something like the embers will actually catch fire and they'll be burning, they'll get blown up in the wind, and it'll jump across a large portion of land. And the moisture is also involved with the weather. If it's raining or if there's high humidity in the air, it'll cause the fire to slow down or not burn as easily. The next factor that determines how fires will spread is topography. And this is all about the slope. If the fire is burning on a mountain, it's very likely that it'll burn very quickly uphill, but it won't burn very quickly when it's going downhill. And the reason for that is that the flames go up and heat also rises, so it causes the fuel above it to actually heat very quickly, and it'll spread that way easier. Fires are fought through the use of ground crews as well as airplanes, and they're fought in 3 ways: hot shots, smoke jumpers, and air tankers. And hot shots are ground crews of about 20 people, and they work to dig a strip of land that's called a fuel break. And what they do is they just take all the fuel out of that area in hopes that once the fire hits that spot, it'll have nothing left to burn, so it'll kind of go out. Smoke jumpers are very similar to hot shots, except that they'll actually jump out of airplanes and parachute into remote areas where they see fire starting. And they use the same techniques as the hot shots, using fuel breaks and things like that. And finally, there's air tankers, and that's kind of the air support. And air tankers will take thousands of gallons of water and also fire retardant, and they will dump that on top of the fire to slow it down. And the fire retardant is that red stuff that you see that comes out of the airplanes if you're ever watching someone try to put out a fire. So let's take a look at some of the history of wildfires in the state of Colorado over the past 50 years. This information is coming from the Colorado State Forest Service. Over the past decade, there was an average of over 2,400 fires a year that burned about 48 acres each individually, and an average of almost 100,000 per year. I have a graph here that shows the statistics of wildfires that have occurred in the state of Colorado over the past 50 years. And as you can see, the 1960s and even the 70s, it's pretty low in both the number of fires and the acres that were burned per fire. But As it gets later on, the number of fires and acres increases, especially in the year from 1990 to 2000. In that decade, it really makes a big jump in the number of fires and also the acres that were burned. The year 2002 saw the worst fires the state had ever seen, almost 250,000 acres of land burned. This included the Hayman Fire, which was the worst fire in the history of the state of Colorado. The Denver reports that the Hayman Fire burned 137,000 acres, had 2,500 firefighters called to help, and cost nearly $39 million in damages. There were also 5 firefighters killed in this fire. The year 2002 had been the worst fire until this year, in which there were over 250,000 acres burned. The fire that directly impacted all the residents of Colorado Springs was the Waldo Canyon Fire. Jeremy Meyer of the Denver Post reports that the Waldo Canyon fire burned over 18,000 acres of land, called on 1,000 firefighters, cost $15.3 million in damage, and caused 2 deaths. This map from Fox News 31 Denver shows the fire destruction by day. As you can see, there's the pink area, and that's where the fire started on the very first day, and it kind of spread slowly through June 23rd, 24th, and 25th. And then once it gets to June 26th is when the fire really kind of takes off. And what happened on June 26th is that the fire, they were hoping to contain it to a small portion, kind of to the north, but it actually started coming down the hill because of high winds and high heat at the time. And basically that was really unexpected because, like I said, fire doesn't usually come downhill, but it actually, because of the really high winds, it was burning downhill almost as fast as it usually would burn uphill. And yeah, it actually burned 347 homes, like I said, and the fire reached 100% containment around July 10th, thanks in large part due to cooling off in weather and also the precipitation we had at that time. But thousands of residents have nothing to return to, and even for those who weren't evacuated or still have their homes, the burn scar is kind of a reminder of all the destruction that was caused by the Waldo Canyon Fire. In conclusion, wildfires are most often caused by human carelessness that provides the small spark to start a fire in very hot conditions. The 3 factors that determine how a fire will spread are fuel, weather, and topography. Firefighters work in small ground crews called hot shots. They also come out of airplanes, and those are called smoke jumpers. And then also air tankers will dump out fire retardant as well as water on top of the fires. In the state of Colorado, there have been approximately 100,000 acres of land burned per year since the year 2000. And the year 2002 was the worst, which had the Hayman Fire, which was the most destructive in the state's history. The Waldo Canyon Fire was very unique in that it traveled at a very rapid pace downhill due to high wind and heat. It burned 347 homes and claimed the lives of 2 people. So that's everything about wildfires in the state of Colorado over this past year and the past decade. Thank you for listening.
Yeah.